Thank you. So again, welcome to the Community Collective Impact Model for Change Initiative Cohort 2 introductory webinar. We really appreciate your attendance on this cold morning here in Ohio. If you haven't done so already, please make sure that you mute your phone. I hear a couple of background noise. We want to make sure that we get as crisp as recording as possible because I do know that there are people who can't make it today. I know that Valerie is unable to make the call today due to a situation at home. Molly, if you're on, would you like to welcome the group? Don't think Molly is. Valerie did send a message to thank you all, and she really did not want to cancel the webinar today. She really felt like it was important for you all to get started even in her absence. So we thank her for her trust in all of us to keep the ship moving forward even before we've gotten started.
This is Julie Spohn from Ohio Moss, so I'll speak for Molly and Valerie. Just wanted to give a huge thank you. I actually work on our CARES and our SOR grant, so I kind of manage the administrative piece of meeting the grant requirements, and just wanted to give a huge thank you for your participation in this project, and we couldn't do this work without all of you, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie, for chiming in. I'm sorry I missed you in the chat box, so thank you. I appreciate it.
I failed to follow directions. I didn't put myself in the chat box. I will now.
Awesome. And Julie is the one who helps keep us on track with our responsibilities with SAMHSA in terms of reporting and compliance. So if you hear from her, then you know that that information is really important, and it's what she needs to keep the money flowing into Ohio. So we're glad for your role that you play in this grant, Julie. We'd like to take a minute and get to know the learning community members that we have. Of course, we have Ohio Moss, and primarily who you'll be interacting with is Molly Stone, and who is the Chief of Prevention, Valerie Leach, who is a Prevention Administrator and also administrates the CCIM4C initiative, and then of course Julie, who handles the cures portion at Ohio Moss. We have our Collective Impact Training Technical Assistance and Evaluation team, and here are the pictures of the individuals that you will be working with throughout the course of the grant. As I mentioned, my name is Holly Raffel, and I'm from here at Ohio University, and my colleague here at OU is Carrie Burgraff. You'll probably be hearing from Carrie more than me as she kind of keeps the ship running, and you'll hear from her later on this webinar. We also have a very close relationship with the Pacific Institute for Research and Evaluation, and we are pleased to have April Schweinhart, David Collins, and Matt Corser from PIRE on our team. Ohio University and PIRE have a long history of working together across many, many projects for the past 10 years, and so this partnership continues with this grant as well. We have long-standing relationship with Tracy Johnson. Tracy was a technical assistance and training provider for SAMHSA for many years and still continues to do that today. He will be one of our individuals who will be providing one-on-one TA. And then we also are excited to have Tessa Miracle join our team. Tessa works on the SPIF-RX grant here in Ohio. She's based out of Interact for Health in Cincinnati, and this is the first time we're formally working with Tessa. She'll be a technical assistance provider, and we're excited to have her as part of our group. We also will be working with the Prevention Institute team. They will be providing us with a lot of the content on community trauma. They'll be facilitating that short workshop that you had in March on the day before the Collective Impact Summit, and then of course you will definitely experience their teaching at the day of the summit. And so they were in Ohio yesterday and are en route back to California and North Carolina, which is their home base. And so they're not here with us today, but you will definitely get the opportunity to interact with them. we would really like to have the opportunity to get to know you on this learning community offering today. And so what we'd have you do is unmute your phones, and we would like you to talk about your name, county, and organization. And if you could just have one person kind of introduce you and your team, why your organization applied for this opportunity, and what your organization hopes to gain from this opportunity. And do we have any volunteers to go first? And as my good friend Derek Longmire says, if you volunteer to go first, you know you don't have to be last.
Hi, this is Stacey Lovewood.
Hi, Stacey. We can hear you, and you're from Champaign.
Sure, yeah. So Adam Thorne and I are the Champaign County team, and we are the two leads of our opiate task force, which is part of our drug-free group. And we applied for this grant because between Adam and I, we sit on all of the prevention coalitions for our community health improvement plans for both Logan and Champaign counties. And we recognize the need for shared vision, shared data collection, shared results, shared outcomes, and have been looking at collective impact and trying to get that off the ground in our community in absence of any technical assistance and help. So this was great timing for us. What we look to be able to accomplish is some of the deliverables that will be focused around opiates in this grant. We have not been collecting that type of data or looking at it from those perspectives. So we're very excited to help lead our group that direction with the intention of down the road leading other coalitions and committees in the direction of more impactful outcome-based work.
Thank you, Stacey. We're excited to have you and Adam on board, and we appreciate you going first. And it sounds like this opportunity is the right opportunity at the right time. Who would like to go next? And Stacey, just a reminder to mute your line so we minimize that feedback.
Good morning. This is, go ahead. I'll yield. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Hi, this is Nicole Williams, and I also have Charlotte Van Osdal here with me, and we are from Seneca County.
Good morning, Nicole and Charlotte. We can hear you. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about why Seneca County applied for CCIM4C and what you hope to gain from this opportunity.
All right, so we are currently working on the SPIF-PFS project. So when we saw this come out, we thought that it sounded like a great follow-up to that grant and process and everything. Also here in Seneca County, we do have our CARSA coalition, which has been working through the SPIF-PFS project, but we also have the Seneca County Opiate Task Force that's been working on a lot of treatments and different things like that. We have a new drug court that's been going really great here. And then we also have the Seneca County Health Alliance. So being able to take kind of what we're learning from here and collaborate on kind of like what Stacey said with all of these different groups and organizations and just making sure that we're bringing the best opportunities for our county.
Thank you very much, Nicole. It's nice to get to work with you in a different setting. So we really appreciate you thinking about how this works with your SPIF-PFS efforts in Seneca County. Who would like to go next? We heard another volunteer. You want to go ahead and jump in?
Good morning. My name is Rick Skillet, and I am representing Always County. I have Donna Dickman as well on the phone. We're with the Partnership for Violence-Free Families, and as of 2 o'clock this afternoon, we will be known as Prevention Awareness Support Services. We're changing our name later today. At any rate, I'm new to prevention world, so this is first a learning experience for me to kind of get familiar with the operations and the greater grant world. But also, we're excited to work with Auglaize County community residents to get a perception of what's going on in Auglaize County. We serve their county through the Opioid Task Force by our Mental Health Recovery Services Board, and so we're looking to gain that insight and then put together some plans to work with them. Unfortunately, Auglaize County represents one of our higher opiate death counties from the areas we work with. So we're excited to come up with some new ideas and work with them.
Thank you, Rick. It's nice to meet you. I haven't met you before, but of course we have a strong relationship with Donna from the Smith PFS. So we're excited to take a good look at Augalaize County and a new name. That's amazing. Are you having a ceremony at 2 o'clock?
Well, we have one planned. If anybody wants to make the trip in the weather, you're welcome to join us. Unfortunately, the entire county shut down, so all of the folks we've invited are not working today. But yes, we are having a little get together from 3 to 4 this afternoon, and hoping to have at least a turnout, if not a great turnout. But we're excited to launch the new name later today.
Wow, that's amazing. And if you have any press releases or information that you'd like to share and have us put up on our website, we're happy to do that for you.
We'll certainly do that. Thank you very much.
And if you have cake, we might all just show up.
We have cake, and I'm guessing if I set it outside for 5 minutes, we'll have frozen cake and send it anywhere in the state for you.
Awesome. It'll be kind of like Dairy Queen, right?
Exactly.
Well, welcome, Rick and Donna. Who would like to go next?
Hello, this is Cynthia Brown-Sherry. I'm calling from Toledo, Ohio, and we're all frozen out, so I'm at home. And I'm calling, I'm the Manager of Prevention and Mental Health Promotion at the Mental Health Recovery Services Board. And we're very glad to have the grant, of course. Amy Priest is also online from our office. And we fund over 70 programs in Lucas County for prevention, treatment, recovery, and support services. And 14 of those are prevention programs and services. So we do have a pretty strong network in Lucas County as far as addressing the opiate epidemic. We have Lucas County Opiate Coalition, we have a Prevention Coalition, the HOPE team, Drug Court, Syringe Exchange Program, Narcan Distribution, of course, drug take-backs. And we have over 20 permanent drug drop boxes as well here in our county. So we're interested in creating pillars instead of silos, and we want to look at the impact on families of the opioid epidemic, secondary trauma for first responders, and hopefully we can create a website to just help folks have easy access to services here in the county. So glad to be here.
Well, welcome, Cynthia and Amy. And Cynthia, you and I, of course, have a relationship with this with PFS because you sit on one of our work group committees for that. So I'm glad to see you on project work.
All right, thank you. Glad to be here.
And this is a wonderful opportunity to sort of set the groundwork for collective impact into looking at those bigger issues that are going to arise within your community. Of course, because we know opiate addiction doesn't exist in the vacuum. It causes additional problems, but it's also exacerbated by additional issues that we see in our communities. So I'm excited to see where all of our projects grow in this area. So thank you. Who would like to go next?
Hi, this is Andrea Hoppin, Montgomery County. Can you hear me?
We can, Andrea. Nice to hear your voice.
Hi, glad to be a part of this. I also have Ashley Mack here, also from my office. So we work for the ATOM board here in Montgomery County. We've actually been working on the opioid issue for many years. And we have two really rather large community stakeholder groups that come together to address our opioid issues. One is our Montgomery County Community Overdose Action Team, and it's looking at the opioid epidemic on a much broader scale. So it works under the Incident Command Model and the Collective Impact Model, run through our public health department and co-sponsored by our ATOM board. It has lots of committees related to treatment and recovery and harm reduction and interdiction and supply reduction, et cetera. It also has a prevention branch that Ashley co-chairs. So it is really looking at the prevention specifically of opioid prescription misuse and abuse. including decreasing efforts that will decrease accessibility and availability of prescription medications. And then the second group is our Montgomery County Prevention Coalition, which is a newly funded DFC recipient. So we just received the Drug Free Communities federal grant this past October for that. Opioid prevention is one of the priorities for that coalition. And because we did not want to replicate work that was already being done under our code, that group is one group that has a dual reporting structure, both up through our prevention coalition that ultimately reports to our DFC grant, but then also through our community overdose action team. So we're not duplicating efforts. So we have a structure in place, and we have been working on collective impact for a while. The thing that has really interested us in this particular process is when we look at Montgomery County and the Dayton, Ohio area, we have had disproportionate issues around drug abuse even long before the opiate epidemic ever hit. So prior to this epidemic, we had rates of drug abuse and diagnoses of addiction disorders that far exceeded other communities that really have nothing to do with the opioid epidemic. And that obviously begs the question of what else is going on in our community. And if we don't address some of those other social determinants of health, then we're just going to be ripe for the next drug epidemic that hits us. And so we really are hoping that this process will help us to look a little bit deeper and a little bit beyond just the substances and prevention of the particular substance, and look at what can we be doing as a community to address some of those other risk factors that our community is experiencing.
Thank you, Andrea. We appreciate your context as well as you providing a nice segue. You are absolutely correct. I think we all here have a shared understanding that the tools and techniques that we are going to use are not just applicable to opiates. We do mention opiates and we do focus on opiates because that's our funding source right now, because it comes from Cures money. However, what the training is focusing on are processes and frameworks that are absolutely good for any type of substance or actually any issues that communities need to look at. So thanks for pointing that out. And I think it's a good reminder to all of us that this work is broad. And again, while we don't always have the flexibility to say that, and we really come at it from an opiate perspective, we do recognize the wide applicability and transferability. So I'm glad to have you as part of a project. I've known you for many years, but haven't got to work with you on a project, so that's exciting. So we're glad to have.
Exciting.
Yeah, we're glad to have Montgomery County here. Welcome.
Thank you.
We have 3 communities left who would like to go next.
Hi, I'll go next. This is Jennifer Thorne. I'm here from Columbiana County, and I have Brenda Ford with me. She's the coordinator of our county coalition. Hi.
Good morning. We hear you. It's nice to have Columbiana County back. It's been a while since I've worked with Columbiana County.
Right. We're pretty excited for this opportunity. What we're looking to get out of it is, when I first started this position in September, I'm the director of outreach here at the Columbiana County Board. And one of the first things that my director gave me was we need to form an opioid hub. And so I did a lot of research on it. What can we do? How can we start this? Who do we get involved? Can we work with our existing coalition so that we're not duplicating efforts? How can we, get people involved and want to take part in it? And then we saw the RFP for the collective impact model. And so we had some discussions here and thought it might be a good thing to try for. So here we are.
Good. Welcome. We're excited to expand on that good work that you've been doing in Columbiana County since the 5th SIG days, which was about 10 years ago that work started. So glad to have you back and see how things have changed and where you've progressed.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it.
Welcome. And that leaves us with Huron and Scioto.
This is Kristen Cardone from Huron County.
Hi, Kristen. We can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I can't really speak to why we signed up for it. Beth Williams had signed up for this before she retired, so I don't really know what her intent was initially with signing up. One of the things I'm really hoping to gain from it is just a framework and tools to help aid and increase collaboration amongst the stakeholders in our community, as collaboration is one of the things that we really need to focus on moving forward to make sure we're meeting the needs of the members of our community.
Thank you, Kristen. It's always difficult to pick up a project in the middle of a movie, so we're grateful for you doing that for Huron County, and we hope that this opportunity will be a good way to reset and provide you a space to look at that collaboration and grow. So we appreciate you being on the call today.
Thank you.
And finally, Scioto County.
Hello, I'm Tiffany Justice. Luann Valentine wasn't able to be here. She had a meeting in Columbus, but as far as I know, she's been working on this a lot, and she's kind of given me some information, but we were looking to collaborate with other agencies in our county and to kind of see where the gaps are and help fill them. We hope not to duplicate services, so we're trying to find that and use these tools to better serve the community.
Thank you, Tiffany. We're glad to have you on the call, and I know it's always difficult to sort of pinch hit for project director when they're away. Again, this meeting will be video recorded. It's being recorded, and we'll have that available on our website. So all of you can share that with anyone who you think this meeting would be useful for.
Thank you.
All right, well, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to get to know the individuals who are in the group and hear a little bit about their communities. I'm going to turn this over to Carrie Burgraff, and Carrie will talk a little bit about the project logistics so you can see how we are going to learn from one another and move this effort forward across our state. Carrie?
Thank you, Holly. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, Carrie, we can hear you.
Perfect. Well, welcome to the webinar. I'm very excited to get to meet all of you and work with all of you. I'm obviously part of Holly's team at Ohio University and also on the Collective Impact Training Technical Assistance and Evaluation team. And I've worked very closely with year one or cohort one of Collective Impact. So I know a lot of you have worked on SIF-TFS and other projects with our collective team before, but I'm excited to get to know you since I'm probably a new face for a lot of you. So first of all, thank you for everyone RSVPing at the Eventbrite link that I had sent out. Like Holly said, it's important to kind of get an accurate head count for these meetings so that we can send those on to SAMHSA, meet our federal reporting requirements. So a lot of the emails that you'll see from me pertain to logistics and kind of just making sure we're running smoothly. RSVPing, all the project information is coming out. So I'm sure you'll love and hate my emails at the same time sometimes, but I will definitely try to get all that information out to you so you feel like you're in the loop. So I'm going to quickly go over how we're going to learn from one another in this learning community, how we're going to meet, and also how our content is going to be delivered. So first, since a lot of you have participated in learning communities before, you know that we adhere to less of a teaching and receiving approach and more of a collaborative sharing, learning, and growing together under the general umbrella of a project and working towards a common goal. But we really lean on all of you as well to have active participation and discussion and really help to enrich the experience and make it a successful learning community. And one way that we'll do that is through webinars like this one. On the save the date, you'll see we have a couple webinars scheduled, and then also a few in-person meetings. So that March evening session before the summit will be an in-person meeting. Obviously, attending the summit will be in person, and that'll give you a lot of good information from our cohort one folks. And then also in April, we'll have a final in-person meeting where we can kind of celebrate the work that we've done in a very short period of time. In between the webinars and in-person meetings, we're going to be having homework assignments. And this is really just to reinforce those concepts that we cover during the webinars, that we talk about. and to help you apply what you learned in your own communities. Holly has sent out an email this morning, which had the agenda and the slides, and also had a syllabus roadmap for this project. And while that's a tentative roadmap, and of course, it will perhaps change once we know kind of what your needs are and what support we need to be giving you. That's the general framework we're working from right now for your homework assignments, so you can kind of see what's expected in between these webinars and in-person meetings. We'll also be offering training and technical assistance. We want to make sure to give you wraparound support so that you don't have a webinar and then you're working on a homework assignment kind of off on your own just to come back to another webinar. So we're going to be having weekly check-in calls with the TA provider. Each community will be asked to have a weekly check-in call. And we're also going to be offering drop-in calls, and these are voluntary, kind of like office hours when you're back in college. And if you need any extra support or help from our team, you know, we'll have times that you can drop in and just kind of call, run your problems by us, and also have other communities on the line to kind of help troubleshoot and tell you what they did, since these drop-in calls are great to learn from one another as well. And finally, the Collective Impact Model for Change Initiative website is where a lot, if not most, of the content and resources are going to come from. While we will do some teaching on the webinars and the in-person meetings, a lot of this content is going to be up on that website. So this is your one-stop shop, first place to look if you're looking for content. And we'll make sure on these check-in calls and our emails and the drop-in calls that you know exactly where to look for this information, and you can always call us with questions if something doesn't make sense. But we are currently working on the website to make it very user-friendly, to be able to look by content for Cohort 2. And Cohort 1 is up there as well, so you can kind of jump around and see what kind of work they did and what the training materials were. But for your purposes, that project information tab on the website will kind of be your home base. So like I previewed how we're going to meet, and I know we have sent out a save the date as well, but this is just for everyone, just double checking calendars again. Our next virtual meeting will be Tuesday, February 26th, and then we have that night session into the summit in March, and then finally in April we'll come together for our final face-to-face and celebration of the work that we've done. And then how content will be delivered. And this is just to kind of hit home again that the Collective Impact website is really the best place to find a lot of content and project work that you're looking for. Right now, the web pages are in the process of being reorganized, like I said, but everything will be up there. We're going to have little blurbs, and I hope that it creates a really good roadmap for you and for your communities and anyone else that's working on the project, so everyone can go have all the information and know exactly what the call is and where we need to go. So at this time, I'm going to pause and ask if anyone has any questions about how we're going to learn from one another, about the learning community itself, how content's going to be delivered. Any questions at this point?
If you just joined, please put your phone on mute. We're getting some backup. I think someone might have gotten disconnected and rejoined. Thank you. Remember, if you're not talking, please leave your phone on mute. I'm still hearing some background noise, so if you are on the phone, please make sure your phone is muted.
All right, well, seeing no questions, we'll kind of forge ahead, and I'll pass it off to Holly to go over the overview of what you're all going to be working on for the next few months. But if questions do arise, please feel free to email me or any of the other team members, our emails will be, well, they're on that email that I sent already. We're all CC'd on that email. And then my email will be at the end of this webinar as well. And I look forward to working with you all. Holly?
Sure. Thanks, Carrie. It may be helpful if you take a few minutes and just talk about the training roadmap a little bit, what's on that and how it can be used.
Sure. So on the training roadmap, this is kind of just our draft framework that we're going to be using to kind of work through the next few months. And this was put together to help us as well, because obviously we know what the project deliverables are. We know where we want to be at the end, but we need to know how to get there. So first, obviously we're starting with our introductory webinar, but then you'll see it's broken down by that work that you're doing in between our meetings. So you'll see a box for January to February. And that's when we're going to be working on the 3 prevention plans, really exploring collective impact in the ecosystem. You'll see the resources that are listed there, where to go on the website, so what you're looking for, the data, theory of change, logic chains, all of that information, where to find it. It also lists that we will be having weekly TA calls and drop-in calls. And then it bleeds right into the next meeting and what we're going to be covering at that meeting, and so on and so forth. So you'll kind of see that this is what's going to be at the meeting, this is what's expected in between the meetings, what you're going to be working on. And then when you come to the next meeting, you'll be prepared to kind of build upon that work, share your progress, share lessons learned, successes, any questions, and then continue to kind of chip away at these project deliverables until we get to the end, or middle of April. I guess April 12th will be when all deliverables are finally due. So that's kind of how to use that document. And we will send, of course, any updates and changes to that and make sure that everybody is aware of what the working document is, not necessarily if there's a draft out there. We'll make sure everyone's on the same page. So any questions on how to use the roadmap? All right, great. So I will hand it over to Holly. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Carrie. We really appreciate you letting us know the resources that are available to us as we move forward, as well as sort of the plan for how this initiative is rolling out. What I'm going to do before we get into what the deliverables are is provide a brief overview of the Community Collective Impact Model for Change Cohort 2. And some of the key takeaway ideas that I'd like to leave you with is, one, community work is hard, important work. And in the introductions, I heard from all of you that there is this genuine interest, one, to impact opioids use in your community, but also impact the broader impacts of substance use in your community. What I also heard was this idea to collaborate, not duplicate services. Look for ways that we can do what we're doing, but do it more efficiently and have better results. And when you work with communities, as many of you know, it is very difficult, but it is so important that you invest in community-based process in order to really make a difference in your community outcomes. The reality is that with this funding opportunity, it was a carry forward funding opportunity, so we are time limited. The funding expires April 30th, and that's why we're very cognizant. There will not be any no-cost extensions because we can't with this work. So that's why we need to kind of come up with the best mix of touching base as a group and doing independent work as you move your communities forward, and also providing you the tools and support that you need to move forward at this aggressive pace. What we hope that you see is that this is sort of a mini project that we hope will sow seeds. We know that by April 30th, you're not going to be left with the solution to opioids or to substance abuse in your community, but we all know the reality is there really is no magic solution. A lot of it is putting together frameworks and processes so we can continually work on an issue. We can look at what we can do, as Andrea said, with the social determinants of health in order to make sure that we are creating the best assets in our community that are going to prevent substance use and promote mental health. So this project is as much about utilizing the framework, growing as a community, as it is about the specific deliverables. And if you keep that in mind, it tends to help frame this project not only for you, but also for your stakeholders. Of course, the KSAs, and we call those knowledge, skills, and attitudes that you develop leading this process and your community members acquire while taking part in this process, we hope that they will transfer and transcend this particular body of work and help move you forward. A lot of you are familiar with these tools. Most of our tools, in fact, all of them have been built from the community up through a lot of different projects. They've been reviewed and approved by providers, Adams board members, a lot of subject matter experts across the state of Ohio over time. And it's a great opportunity to get on the same page as those who have participated in SPIF-6, SPIF-PFS, SPIF-RX, our suicide prevention grants, the collective impact grant. And so it's a good opportunity to see how these tools work in your community and can help support your efforts. What we know from our work is that communities are increasingly facing wicked problems. And this article, I like to say, is vintage because it was published in 1973, which was the year I was born. Nobody do any quick math in your head. But it was designed by community planners. And what they said is that communities are facing these deeply wicked problems, and they're not wicked because they have consequences like death, like the opioid epidemic, but they're wicked because they are complicated because they require a lot of stakeholders and they require a community approach to solve. And interestingly enough, back in 1973, the authors, Rattel and Weber, had the foresight to list substance use and mental health issues as wicked problems that we need to address. So this idea that substance use is a wicked problem requires a number of solutions, not the one solution, and also this constant checking in and reframing and framing the issue. It really isn't new. We use this article a lot. It's pretty dense, but we will post it on the Collective Impact website at that address that's listed there for you to take a peek at. But this wicked problem framework is really where this idea of collective impact was born. In their article, what's interesting is that Rattel and Weber say when you're taking this wicked problem that is so difficult to understand or so difficult to sort of get a handle on, it's kind of unwieldy like an octopus. Like, as we know, if you chop off the arm of an octopus, it just grows another one, right? And that's what these wicked problems are like, that the first issue we have to look at is how we are going to resolve it. And the way we look at how we resolve it explains and determines the nature of the problem's resolution in our community. So the first step in dealing with wicked problems is coming up with a framework so that we as a community understand how we're operationalizing the wicked problem, so therefore we can best plan our attack, if you will, against it, or our approach against it. We, through research and through our working knowledge in Ohio, framed the opioid epidemic into sort of 5 pillars, if you will, to use a word that Cynthia used. And we said, you know, if I am working on the opioid epidemic in my community, I should be very closely paying attention to 5 things. And a lot of you talked about this in your introduction. 1, we have to reduce the supply. 2, we have to address the demand for these or desire for these drugs. 3, we have to mitigate consequences or harm reduce. And then we have to think about treatment and recovery supports. And if we're paying attention to all 5 of these areas, we should be able to come up with a comprehensive community plan that's going to reduce opioid use disorder deaths and increase access to opioid use disorder treatment, including medicated assisted treatment. In the arrow, those are the goals of the CURES grant. That's what SAMHSA is funding Ohio to do. They are looking for work in Ohio that is going to meet these 2 specific goals, right? And so that's kind of where the flavor of, we'll always be talking about this and framing the opioid use. What you do at home and how you see these tools as being valuable for other substances or other situations is up to you. And I think you can see this is framing the alcohol epidemic, right? reducing the supply, reducing the demand. We have consequences of alcohol use. We need treatment and recovery. Marijuana is something that I know is weighing heavily on all of our minds. So framing the marijuana landscape in Ohio, we can look at the same 5 things. Yesterday, I just saw where some states are trying to legalize psilocybin mushrooms, right? It's going to be the same way. And we know that when we think about substance use, these are great pillars to think of. And many of you are doing this work in the community. However, a lot of times there's a lack of coordination, right? And so what we want to do is use this as an opportunity of how can we get on the same page, because we all want the same outcome. And that outcome is what's in that gray bar. And so if we all realize we all play these roles, we need to bolster the roles. We need to take things that are working and amplify them, take the things that aren't working, or maybe the things we've been doing just as legacy programs but aren't really impacting it, and take that money and funnel it to other areas that are, or other promising practices, and then realize that we are all playing an important role in the outcome. So no one area gets privileged over another, right? We need prevention, which is areas 1, 2, and 3. We need treatment, and we need recovery supports. All of these 5 areas are necessary. However, as most of you alluded to, they're not sufficient. So I'm going to say that again because that's important. Prevention, treatment, and recovery supports are necessary in addressing the opioid epidemic, or really any other substance. However, they're not sufficient. And what we know is that communities are also facing individual trauma and community trauma. And these areas oftentimes are coming from the social determinants of health that are at play in communities. Some communities are facing joblessness. Some communities have homelessness issues. Some communities are facing social isolation issues. Some communities need to heal from the damage of the opioid epidemic. You have children who are in out-of-home placements. These are all issues that are fueled by the opioid epidemic, but also then exacerbate the opioid epidemic. These are the issues sometimes we say are the elephant in the room, if you will. And we all know that when we come together and you have maybe food security at the table, you have medical care security, you have your community action, and you're all sitting in the room and said, if we could solve this in our community, or if we could work towards mitigating this issue, then all of our jobs would be easier. So I'm going to pause at this point and ask each community to type in the chat box. And again, this doesn't have to be your final big issue or wicked problem, but what are some of the wicked problems that your community is facing? Those ones that come up in meeting after meeting. So just type in your community and then that wicked problem that you have. See many of you typing. I appreciate that. And again, you don't necessarily have data. We're just kind of checking a gut check of what are some of those wicked problems, just so we know what you're thinking. So we have Seneca County. Nicole and Charlotte have kinship care. Andrea from Montgomery County. Andrea just got moved a little bit there on me. Loss of major manufacturing jobs, sense of hopelessness, which then fuels mental health and substance abuse issues. Stacy from Champaign, absence of social capital and living wage jobs. Rick from Auglaize, community acceptance. It doesn't happen here, so sometimes that's denial. Kristen, lack of recovery housing, guidance for recovery, and transportation, all wicked problems. I'm not sure who. Family members, increase in abuse in foster care, grandparents raising children's children. Yes, a lot of those social connected. I'm not sure who that is. Cynthia, foster care placement, grandparents raising grandchildren, so some shared concerns there. That's in Lucas County with Cynthia. And then Jennifer from Columbiana County, parental involvement, transportation, and general drug use. Yes, a lot of wicked problems. And those are common that we've seen in our cohort 1 of CCIM4C, and also that I see in my work across the state. And what's interesting is that if we go back to that article, and anyone who knows me knows that I believe in the adage that there is nothing as practical as a good theory, is when we look at the article of the properties of wicked problems, there's 10 properties. One of them is that every wicked problem can be considered to be a symptom of another wicked problem. So we have to address the symptoms and the root causes if we're going to be successful. And if we aren't willing as a community to take on some of those big issues, things that you wouldn't want on your organizational scorecard alone because you know you can't make a dent in it alone, that's where collective impact comes in. So we need to make sure that we frame our issue, because that's another property of wicked problems, that we need to frame them appropriately. This next slide shows that very quickly into the collective impact work, we realized we needed to add a sixth area. And as I said before, prevention, treatment, and recovery is necessary. We never expect for that to go away, right? Because we know we're going to need to continually provide those options in our community, hopefully at varying levels, right? We hope to increase the amount of prevention, which will then decrease the amount of treatment and recovery supports. But right now, we need to make sure that we're addressing all three areas. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. So communities need to then say, how are we going to take on this sixth area? And it could be something that's causing community trauma. You could think of it as the wicked problem in your community. Our CCIM4C communities think of it as, they frame it positively, as our big, hairy, audacious goal. What is that big, hairy, audacious goal that we want for our community? And of course, once you know what it is, you can go ahead and type it in. So instead of having 1 through 5 and then the 6 being community trauma, it could say foster care system, or it could say community social capital, or it could say transportation, right? But we know that we need to frame the opioid epidemic, or reframe it, into including that area. And that's exactly what I heard from most of you in your introduction, is we're looking for a way to pay honor to treatment, recovery, and prevention, while at the same time pushing our communities forward to thinking about what is that other area that we need to take on. So I'm going to pause here and just take a quick temperature check and see if you could just type in the chat box. Is this idea kind of making sense to you? Is this something that you feel your community needs as they think about substance use and mental health? Oh, Tiffany, I see. Thank you, Tiffany, for letting us know who that was. I appreciate it. Stacy from Champaign, it's exciting and scary. Yes, no one wants to touch these issues. That's what we're hearing. Kristen, yes, I think this will be beneficial. Jennifer from Columbia, it's making sense. Good. I appreciate you doing these check-ins because it's hard in virtual learning community. Tiffany says we need this. Cynthia says very much so. I'm now hearing in meetings that professionals have opioid burnout. Exactly. And so there's lots of ways to be creative and have meetings about opioids without actually saying the word opioid. This is resonating with Seneca County, Nicole and Charla. Rick, it's a big task and getting all involved will be crucial. Yes, and Rick's from Auglaize County. Thank you all for doing that quick check-in. It helps me see that I think we are ready to move on. And again, this is hard, important work, but you will have frameworks to guide your work, and you will have a lot of support. And really what we hope is that what April 12th brings to you is the beginning where you've planted lots of seeds, and that you're able to move forward with this work in your community in a way that best benefits it. So let's really bring this specifically to the CCIM4C Cohort 2 work. In this abbreviated time frame, we're going to focus on the first three areas: supply reduction, demand reduction, and consequence mitigation. We are going to focus on the prevention aspect, which is why your deliverable is a prevention plan. We know that many of you have things on the go, into supply reduction, demand reduction, and consequence mitigation. So as you work on these plans, it could be just a way for you to gather up what you're doing and be able to have concise documents that say, hey, this is where we have these areas covered in our community. And what we hope to do is introduce one of that key, a key part of collective impact, which is collaboration and also shared measurement. And if you get some examples going in your community, it will be easier to move forward. So while this first task to some of you may just seem like, oh, we're just kind of reframing what we're already doing, we find that some communities find duplication. Some communities are finding these legacy programs, and when they actually write them down, they're like, why are we doing that? Like, just because we've been doing it for 25 years doesn't mean we should be doing it, right? It really forces folks to think critically about what they're doing in the area of prevention. It also gets you familiar with the tools for strategic planning. And for some of you who've been using the tools in primarily demand reduction, it will help you see how the tools really transfer to supply reduction and to consequence mitigation or harm reduction. So that's a really important first step. Then, as you get that going under your belt, in a couple of weeks, we'll send you out some pre-reads, some pre-videos to watch for our next learning community, where we'll talk about how to infuse that sixth area of community trauma. Note that we don't require you through this project to have a plan to address community trauma. So you won't necessarily leave this with a strategic plan, but you'll leave this with an ecosystem. So those people in place in your community and a mechanism for how to address that wicked problem. So please rest assured that the expectation isn't that you have the wicked problem all figured out. It's more that you are using what you learn in something familiar, which is the prevention sphere, and then you're able to draw upon that experience because it's going to be really successful. Your community is going to be like, wow, this is amazing. And then you're able to transition that work into, and all of those knowledge, skills, and attitudes into working on that bigger issue. What questions do we have before we move on to what those actual project goals and deliverables are? And you can unmute your phone if you want to just ask a question, or you can type it in the chat box. Okay. I'm going to transition over to Matt Corser, who is going to play the role of Valerie Leach today, since she's unable to make the call. And just a reminder, if you unmuted your phone, please go ahead and mute that so we don't hear background noise. And Matt, I'll hand this over to you. So if you want to do a voice check, and then we'll get you going.
Great. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, Matt, you are loud and clear. Thank you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm really glad to be on the webinar with you. I know many of you are really looking forward to the journey we're going to take over the next few months together. I'm going to pinch hit here for Valerie, and we're really just going to talk briefly about the project goals and deliverables. The RFP that you responded to had 3 goals that, they're really going to structure the work we're going to do between now and April 30th. The first is that we're going to do the comprehensive community level prevention plan map that's going to be grounded in the SPIF. And it's really going to focus on those first 3 areas in the graphic that Dr. Raffel just put up: reinfection, supply reduction, and consequence mitigation. We're going to identify and implement evidence-based prevention strategies that are going to help our communities address opioid misuse and abuse. And as Dr. Raffel just mentioned, we're going to be developing an ecosystem, and that's really going to be a subcommittee structure, a group of essentially our human capital, and then a mechanism using the principles of collective impact to help us position our communities to better address community trauma in the future. So those are sort of the 3 broad goals that are going to structure our work, and that really everything we do is going to inform. And I'm going to drill into them a little bit in a little bit more detail now. To address basically to build out our community level prevention plan map, we're going to have a total of 3 different prevention plan maps, one for demand reduction, one for supply reduction, and one for consequence mitigation or harm reduction. And really, in one sense, those will be separate plan maps, but they'll also be related. They will all hopefully work together and help your community address those 3 areas. And we're going to use a strategic plan map template. And many of you have worked with us in the past and probably have some familiarity with that template. It's on the website, and here in a minute I'll actually put a screenshot of it up as well. This is a little bit hard to see, but you can certainly pull it up on the website. One of the things that really is important about this plan map template is that it's going to include a theory of change, a theory of action, measurable outcomes, and it's going to have your data right there. So what we're finding with our communities, and for those of you who have worked with this in the past, this is a great way that you can share this with stakeholders, and it's a great user-friendly way to have that plan together in a way that's really going to guide work. Second thing that this plan template is really going to help us do is it's going to help us. We know that our data may evolve over time. Our problems and root causes may evolve over time as well. And we know that once we have a plan, that over time we'll need to continue to address that. And this gives you a tool that actually is going to be easy to update, easy to use both now and into the future to guide work in your communities. The second thing we're going to be doing is we're going to identify and implement evidence-based prevention strategies. And, for this, you're going to need to turn in at least 3 strategy proposal forms. And it's essentially going to be at least one strategy for each of the 3 sort of focal areas of prevention that we're working on with this project: demand reduction, supply reduction, and consequence mitigation. And we've got a strategy proposal form. It's up on the website. And as we move forward, we'll focus more on that. And during your drop-in calls and weekly TA calls, we'll focus on that as well. So I wouldn't worry too much about it right now. But really, the nice thing about that strategy proposal form is that it's really going to guide you through a lot of the aspects that you need to think about when you're selecting a strategy and beginning to move towards implementation. To inform our third goal of building an ecosystem, we're going to use the data that you have already, and we'll do that together to select a wicked problem that your community needs to work on across sectors and really across that continuum of care. And you'll have the freedom, the flexibility to build that ecosystem in a way that reflects your community. It's something that is locally owned, locally driven, fits the culture, the context, the players in your community. So across our communities here in Cohort 2, we'll probably see those ecosystems represented in a lot of different ways, and there might be different players in those ecosystems, and that's fine. What's going to be key here is that the ecosystem you develop is something that really fits your community, and it'll end up focusing on both the structure and the process for how we move forward. And I wouldn't worry so much about that right now. As the slide says, there are resources coming. We'll step through together to where we get there. Here's a sample ecosystem and one way a community represented it. It does not, yours does not necessarily have to look like this, but this is one way that we can do this. One of the things we have found with our first cohort of communities is that having a graphic that really outlines what that ecosystem looks like really helps identify those relationships. And it really does help, articulate what that looks like and sort of how it's going to work together. Deliverable due dates. In here, I think really that tentative syllabus or roadmap is going to be helpful. We're going to have lots of opportunities along the way to turn work in for feedback, to basically pause and get a sense of where we are, and then get the feedback that we can use to refine and improve our work. That syllabus roadmap really kind of gives you a good sense of when things are due and what to be working on. it'll be something as well that I think, as we work together, we'll probably build that out even a little bit more so that, as you have questions or things come up that maybe we haven't thought about, we get that in there and so that everybody's essentially got the same roadmap what we're working towards. The key deadline to keep in mind is that all of our deliverables for this project are going to be due April 12th by 5 p.m. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us a little bit of time to get those finalized and to get them reviewed before the hard stop we have on this project of April 30th. So I'm going to pause actually for a moment and ask if there are any questions, and you can either unmute or you can type in the chat box. But would be glad to hear any questions or concerns that you have at this point.
Thank you. I see where Cynthia had her question answered. Again, there are 3 key products for the deliverable. And those were all in the RFP, and Matt kind of talked about them now. Stacy from Champaign had a question: what cost should we prepare for those of us needing a budget revision? Stacy, I think as you go through, because you can use some of this funding obviously for your planning process, but you can also use it to implement those strategies you identify in your prevention plan. So it may be best to wait until you've kind of got your prevention plans done, and then if you want to use some of the funds from these dollars to implement, go ahead and do that at that time. In order to release those implementation funds, you would just set up in GIFMIS an implementation plan, and you would have to have that strategy implementation form completed and sent to Valerie, and Valerie can answer all of those questions. But typically what her counsel has been, wait until you know what you're going to implement, and then go ahead and do that budget revision at that time. Does that help, Stacy? Okay, great, thank you. And Valerie's very flexible, and we all recognize that with a planning initiative where you can use implementation funds, those budget revisions can come at any time, and just to work really closely with Valerie, who works closely with Julie, to make sure that it all gets taken care of.
Any other questions at this point? Not hearing any at the moment. I think one of the closing things I want to emphasize for all of us is that we're starting a journey, and we're going to do this together. And it's also something where we're going to, step through this. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed at the moment. That there's a lot of steps, and April 30th we will be amazed at how far we've come. And I see as well, Stacy just typed a question, will we have the opportunity to hear from Cohort 1 on this journey, or have them as resources? And I think that's a great question. Certainly, during our summit in March, it'll be a great opportunity to hear about their journey and about essentially what they've learned and where they are. The other thing as well is that a lot of the resources and a lot of the tools that you'll be able to work with are things that were developed in partnership with those Cohort 1 communities. So I think certainly that's a great thing for us to keep in mind. I really appreciate that question. And I think what we can do as well is look for opportunities where, essentially, our Cohort 1 communities and our Cohort 2 communities can work together, because we certainly know that communities are strongest when we're learning from each other.
And Stacy, I think that's probably coming from your experience with the SPIF PFS. We have kind of that Cohort 2 coming behind, and those will be the opportunities on the drop-in calls. So the drop-in calls will be formulated by topic. You'll have training and technical assistant members there, and then depending on the topic, we'll pull in the Cohort 1 members, so you'll have the opportunity to hear from them and their experiences as well. And we really draw upon this resource of you have a time to give and you have a time to receive. And so we'll be asking those Cohort 1 peoples for their time to give and share their experiences as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I think with that, we'll turn it over to Dr. Raffel to talk about next steps and some key ideas.
Good. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you filling in on short notice for Valerie. Thank you. So next steps, I've sat in on these training and technical assistance and introductory webinars from SAMHSA and from HRSA and a lot of federal funders. And I always appreciate when folks give me what are the key takeaways that I need to do now. And that's what we hope to do in this section. So one key idea is that your organization can't do this alone. You're going to have to draw upon the many resources that you have in your community, and you're going to have to start getting people together to sort of facilitate this idea that we have this opioid epidemic or substance use and mental health issues in our community. We're going to start here at looking at what we're already doing or where we need to be doing work in prevention as it relates to opioids. So that's why we kind of launched with people actually doing work. And what we found is if the entry point is into a lot of theory, people kind of say, well, how does this apply to me? But if we give them a concrete example of how this collective impact approach works around a task, then communities are mobilized a lot quicker and easier. So the collective work on the strategic plans for prevention is a great way to prime the pump, right? And it's a great way to reframe. So even if you've been doing strong prevention for 100 years in your community, putting it on the strategic plan maps that they get printed out in 11 by 17, they're really easy for people to follow. All of a sudden what you're saying is we're putting everything in one place, we're using the same format. That creates the idea of a backbone, and backbone is one of those critical elements of collective impact. So basically what you're saying is, hey, let's come together, let's take a look at what we're doing. We'll use this as an opportunity to find gaps, to eliminate things that aren't working for us, amplify the things that are working for us, thinking about prevention in 3 separate areas, and seeing how that can transcend into our other work. The one key point is that we don't really have time to collect new data. You are going to find through this process, particularly if you're switching to an outcomes-driven or data-driven approach for the first time, where we're asking to actually look at why you're doing the programs you've been doing and what data are you collecting to support them, that you're not going to have all the data you want, and that's okay. Again, we don't look for you to have, oh, we have our 3 prevention plans done, they've turned in on April 12th, check. We look for these to be living documents and that your community can, have a plan for marijuana or have a prevention plan for alcohol. And they're not going to be static, right? But you're going to turn in the best plan at the time of April 12th, right? And you may have areas where you want to collect new data and keep this group, whoever's working on it, active in that process. So hopefully that makes sense as you move forward and you understand why we're using this as an entry point. So start with the end in mind. If I was a project director sitting in your shoes, I would say, you know what, the first step in my community is to do a comprehensive, outcomes-oriented or data-driven, community-based strategic plan for opioid prevention. I've got to be concerned with 3 areas: demand reduction, supply reduction, and consequence mitigation or harm reduction. In my sandboxes, I have to use this template. So now, where do I need to go from here? Well, get a basic understanding of the CCIM4C initiative and share it. Our CCIM4C project directors from Cohort 1 created a 10-minute overview video. There's a link to it. It's also available on the CCIM4C website. You go to the main page and it's at the bottom right-hand corner, kind of tucked away. And so, watch that video, share it with the people you're bringing it so they can see that this is part of a larger vision. The next thing I would do if I was leading this is think about my approach. How am I going to define the work? You need to come up with your community's working definitions for supply reduction, demand reduction, and consequence mitigation. Like consequence mitigation or harm reduction, you have the use of naloxone. It could be needle exchange. It could be, you have to think of all of those risks or harms that are associated with opioid use that your community is doing. Supply reduction, of course, is interdiction, but it's also the things like drop boxes and deterra bags and all of those things. And then, of course, our primary prevention as well. And it's not just youth in schools, right? We need primary prevention, demand reduction can be that primary prevention that we're doing with youth in schools, but it can be, what does our community have for alternatives to pain? We want to reduce the use of pain medication, so we have to make sure that we have enough alternatives, physical therapy, acupuncture, etc. So you really need to think about how your community defines those 3 buckets of reducing the supply, reducing the demand, and then mitigating the consequences. You also need to think about who in your community you'll need to collaborate with to do the work. And some communities have found it's easier to think of having 3 subcommittees, 1 in each area. There may be some cross-pollination or cross-membership, and that's fine. The key thing is it's not up to you as a project director to do this alone and just, quote, knock it out. If you're doing that, you're not building the capacity your community needs to do collective work. So even if you've been leading this work in your community, now's a good time to bring people in and say, hey, you know, we did a grant opportunity. The first thing they're asking us to do as a practice exercise is map our prevention. As a project director, I think this is great. We're doing a lot of great things. This helps us look at it in a very organized, concise way. It also ensures that we're collecting data to get to the outcomes that we want, right? And so again, framing it that way is going to be really useful because you want to move your community along in the process. The process is where the magic happens, not the product. And again, you're lucky to have your weekly check-in calls with your TA provider, Tracy Johnson. And Tracy does a lot of work with Raylette Pickett as well. And they're great at community mobilization. They can answer all of those questions for you. So we'll provide TA and check-ins not only on deliverables, but also on the process, because you need to move your community ahead and get that buy-in to that idea that we're all in this together. Because if you can't coalesce around basic prevention, you're not going to coalesce around issues like poverty or homelessness or the foster care system. Does that make sense? You can just type in a chat box if the idea of process being central to this and capacity building. Good. Sounds like I'm singing to the choir here, so that's good. Good. Then you need to think about how you'll divide the work. And as I mentioned, subcommittees worked really well. So that's one approach. Sometimes people call them like subject matter expert teams. I mean, you know your community better than anyone else. So thinking that through and what language is going to work best is absolutely appropriate. Then you have to think about how I'm going to lead and manage this work. And this is your role as a project director. And again, leading this work is hard, important work, and we're grateful for you for taking this risk to join us on this journey. How are you going to maximize the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and attitudes of your community partners without getting bogged down in the process? Again, where we see most bogging points are, oh my gosh, we've been doing this, but we haven't been measuring it very well. How are we going to take this to outcomes? You know, that's okay. You can even put in your strategic plan map, and your TA providers will help you with this. Like, wow, we realized we weren't measuring this, but now we're going to get on it. And that's okay. That can be a goal of your project. You need just to make sure that you're moving towards actionable solutions. And that's where the drop-in calls will be helpful, because we'll have communities who kind of got that, you know, analysis paralysis. We need more data. And those project directors had to learn how to say, you know what, we have to go with what we have. Here's how we move forward. So the drop-in calls will be really useful to you as well. And then finally, and Stacy already was thinking about this, and what resources will you need to ensure that you're able to meet the deadline of April 12th? And so those budget allocations and working really closely with the state will be helpful there. So really thinking about your approach, taking some time. You were required to have 2 people. So, you know, having those 2 project directors or co-leads help you think through the work. And if you're not the leader of your organization, you need to make sure that you have the authority to do this work as well. So if you're sitting in middle management and you need to have those conversations with your supervisor, now would be a good time. Maybe share this webinar, share what you learned to make sure that you're supported in the process. That's another issue of where things got bogged down, is where a project director was feeling like they were being asked to do something that was sort of above their pay grade, or sort of without the blessing of the person who authorizes them to do this good work. So if you feel you're in that middle management position, now would be a good time to say, hey, here's what I'm being expected to do. What can I do and what can't I do in my role? So being strategic as a leader is something that is going to be very useful for you as you move forward. And then as far as the action steps for how to actually complete these strategic plans, we have it all laid out for you here. Visit the SPIF page on the website to help you become familiar with it. Organize the available data you have. We have a resource there for you. Learn about logic chains. Learn about the Ohio SPIF planning tools and the strategic plan maps. Become familiar with our strategy selection tools. Again, these are the resources we have. They'll be supported by your weekly calls. We will have drop-in calls probably around all of these key areas. Cohort 1 members on there, our TA team on there, so you can jump on the calls. We repeat the calls several times. So if you're a morning person, you can have your coffee call, you have a lunch call, and you have an evening call. The drop-in calls is no more than 30 minutes. But we want you to be supported in this work. The most important thing to us is use your resources. What we found through this experience with Cohort 1 is your mindset's important. Many project directors have said, if you think of this as like an online class that meets monthly, it's really helpful because it's up to you to keep up with the materials and to keep moving forward at home and kind of using the office hours and using your one-on-one time with your instructor, if you will, if you go back to that analogy. That's how you keep the CCIM4C initiative moving forward. This is an extremely aggressive timeline. I know many of you, this is not your full-time job, but part of kind of signing up for this was saying that we were going to do these 3 deliverables. You knew what they are in the RFP, and we're providing you tools to move forward. So it's best not to just wait until April 1st to try and get these together. Because again, it's about the process, mobilizing your community, and that's why we have kind of the suggested roadmap or syllabus. The 30-minute weekly TA check-ins, they're up to 30 minutes. Sometimes it'll be 10, sometimes it could be all 30. These are just opportunities for you to discuss your progress, and it also provides us with valuable information about how to structure the learning environment. It gives us ideas for how to topic out those drop-in calls. So being open and honest with your TA provider is crucial because our team meets Monday afternoons, and that allows us to provide the best support for you. If we don't know how you're doing or you're telling us everything is great, then we can't make changes or adjustments. This is definitely a two-way collaborative street, and your community experience is important to us. 3, again, drop-in calls. Most of our communities find those really useful because you're not just listening to a TA provider, you're listening to a fellow Cohort 2, and you're also drawing from the experiences of Cohort 1. It's an opportunity for you to hear from your peers and know that you're not in this alone. We all have a lot of times shared struggles, and we can come up with shared solutions to them. The 4th thing that's really important to me, and this is kind of my area of academic study as a faculty member, is this notion of communities struggling appropriately. And by appropriate struggle I mean that it has to be productive struggle. There is growth in learning. There is growth in struggling. We need to struggle or wrestle with our data, wrestle with learning, watch a webinar, maybe watch an asynchronous webinar more than once to get it. That's okay. We don't want it to become unmanageable. Your team, if you don't struggle from now to April 2nd, I'd be really surprised because the struggling is where the magic happens, getting outside of your comfort zone. So you're working on something and you're just not there yet. If the struggle becomes overwhelming, reach out to your peers. We're in the process of getting the contact lists all together and making sure we know who's on first, because a lot of times the person who applied for the RFP is not the person doing the work. So Carrie's working on untangling all of that. We'll have the contact list with all of our contact information, all of your peers' contact information, and then the Cohort 1 is already on the website, so you can reach out to them at any time. Of course, reach out to the TTA lead, Carrie, sooner rather than later. Again, we talk about this project every Monday afternoon, and having that information, even if it's just your particular situation, will have a lot of people with a lot of experience, and we can help you find your next step. So struggle is good, but it has to be productive struggle. What questions do we have? See, a lot of people are typing in, so I'm just going to give them a few minutes. Stacy says, maybe I missed this, but when will we know who will be reaching out for the weekly call-ins? Again, that's when, as soon as Carrie gets a good handle on the registration today and us learning who needs to be on this list, will give us an idea, and then we'll meet on Monday, so it should be by the end of next week, we'll be able to figure it out. Donna, will there be a staff member assigned to connect with each county? Donna, that's your experience with the SPIT PFS. This project isn't resourced to that level, so it may not be the same person all the time, but you will definitely connect with someone. What we do is we just identify the needs, and so if you have a TA call and a weekly check-in with someone one week, but you're struggling with something else, and we find that another person has that expertise, we will go ahead and let you know who that will be. But you can assume that your weekly calls will be at a standing time. Who that TA provider is may or may not vary dependent upon your need. Tiffany, can you provide more examples of what types of things others have implemented? Cohort 2 was unique because they actually had to go through some data, or Cohort 1, sorry, went through the data collection process. So they just submitted their implementation grants at the same time that you all submitted. So we don't have all of that up on the website quite yet, but you can go to the website and you'll see there's a tab for webinars. We did a lot of webinars where strategies were previewed. So when you explore the website, let me pull this up on my computer. It's called Webinar Series. If you go to that webinar series, you'll see short 30-minute webinars that talk about a lot of different strategies. Cynthia says, this has helped clarify the process. I appreciate the webinar meetings. Thanks. I really appreciate you. Again, immediate next steps. We will get out the contact list. We'll start working on that. You should definitely hear from us by the end of next week as you give us some time to play catch up and get those calls started. But in the meantime, you all can be exploring the website and the resources and moving forward. I appreciate all of your participation today in the chat box and via the phone. Thank you for helping us keep this webinar on time. Again, this work is hard, important work, and we think of our public servants. A lot of times we think of our EMS providers and our military, but those of you who are providing service in government agencies as well as nonprofits, that is important public services too. So coming from the Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Affairs, I want to thank all of you for your public service and helping to keep Ohio a safe and healthy place for all of our residents. So thank you for that. On behalf of the entire CCIM4C team, I want to welcome you to this journey, and we're really looking forward to April 12th when we get all of these deliverables turned in, because I think you're all going to do amazing work. Julie, do you have any closing comments that you'd like to add from the department?
Just want to echo I look forward to seeing your work, and I thank you for joining us and for your dedication to this project, and I really look forward to seeing how things pan out.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day and stay safe and warm. I think we're in for another day of cold, and then hopefully Monday it'll be 60 degrees and we can all fall out and get to work. Have a good day. This concludes our virtual learning community.